ICord, idiot cord. What's that? Do you need to make some? Hi, welcome to CHeri Knits. I love knitting and I want you to love it too. If your pattern is calling for an ICord, let me show you how to make it easily with 2 double-pointed needles and some yarn. Let's take a look at how to make ICord. And what is ICord? ICord is basically just a knitted tube, a small, tiny knitted tube that you can use for several things in your knitting. You might make a hat and do a little ICord embellishment at the top. You might need a loop on a Christmas stocking, and you can do ICord for that. You can use it as a strap of a purse, or you can even use it to make a little loop for a button, to connect a button down. And those are a couple reasons you might want to make ICord. ICord was reinvented, rediscovered by Elizabeth Zimmerman, and she called it ICord. She renamed this technique ICord, and the I stands for idiot because Elizabeth Zimmerman said that any idiot could do it, which I'm not sure if that's a compliment or not. But anyway, ICord is a great skill to have in your knitting toolbox. And so to do ICord easily, you're going to need 2 double-pointed needles and some yarn. And we're going to make a pretty tiny ICord. We're just going to use 4 stitches. And so I'm going to do long tail cast on and just cast on 4 stitches. You probably don't need a super long tail for this because you're just going to be tucking it in or attaching it down, but you can leave a longer tail if you needed to. So once you cast on your stitches, what you want to do is transfer that needle to your left hand, but don't turn it like you normally would to work across. You want to slide the stitches to the opposite end from where the working yarn is. And then go ahead and knit into that first stitch. Pull the yarn behind, you can see it's coming from behind, and wrap it over and knit that stitch through. Now, don't worry about pulling too tight on that first stitch. When you go into the second stitch, before you wrap the needle, you're going to give it a good tug and tighten it up, and that's what's going to help it to close up into a tube. Because what you're doing with ICord essentially is knitting a tiny tube. And so you finished. Take it from your right hand to your left hand. Instead of turning the needle around, you slide the stitches to the opposite end, enter that first stitch, and then the yarn is coming from the wrong end of the needle, and lay it over the new needle and pull it through. And now on the second stitch, give it a tug. And you'll have to experiment with your yarn, depending on the thickness of the yarn you have, how big of an ICord you can get away with. I think the most I've done is a 6-stitch ICord, but that was with pretty tiny yarn. Usually I do something that's 3 or 4 stitches. I typically don't want too big of a cord. So now I'm going to take it, slide it to the opposite end, enter that first stitch, and the yarn's coming from the wrong side, drape it over. And remember, it's on that second stitch that you give it a tug and pull it through. And then you can just keep doing this until your ICord is as long as you want. And the further you go, the more concealed your seam will be. And just make sure that you're pulling really tight on that second stitch, and then you'll have a nice enclosed tube. So knit that first stitch. Don't worry about pulling it tight until right now. All right, and now you know how to make ICord, and you can use this to embellish your knitted projects. All right, ICord, idiot cord, what do you think? Leave a comment below and let me know which one you prefer. And let me know what you've been making lately.